watched in horror as an otherwise ordinary summer day descended into chaos. It was July 14th, 2024, just days before the Republican National Convention. Donald Trump, the party's presumptive nominee, was holding a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. The air was thick with anticipation, the crowd buzzing with excitement. Then a sharp crack cut through the cheers. A lone gunman, later identified as Thomas Matthew Crooks, had opened fire from a rooftop overlooking the rally. His target, Donald J. Trump. The bullet struck Trump in the ear, sending shock waves through the crowd and across the nation. Panic erupted as Secret Service agents rushed to Trump's aid, shielding him from further harm. The nation held its breath. This wasn't just an attack on a politician, it was an attack on the very fabric of American democracy. The question on everyone's mind, would he survive? The rally in Butler, Pennsylvania had all the hallmarks of a classic Trump event. The air was thick with anticipation and excitement as supporters eagerly awaited the arrival of their candidate. Thousands of supporters, clad in red hats and waving "Make America Great Again" flags, had gathered to hear their candidate speak. The sea of red hats was a testament to the unwavering loyalty of Trump's base. The atmosphere was electric, the crowd energized by Trump's fiery rhetoric. Every word he spoke seemed to ignite a new wave of cheers and applause, creating a symphony of support that echoed through the venue. But beneath the surface, a palpable tension lingered. It was as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. The political climate was deeply divided, and this division was felt even in the midst of the rally. The political climate was deeply divided, and tensions between supporters and detractors often ran high. Small confrontations and heated debates were not uncommon, adding to the underlying sense of unease. As Trump launched into a tirade against his political opponents, a single gunshot pierced the air. The sound was sharp and sudden, cutting through the noise of the crowd like a knife. The crowd, initially confused, froze in place. Then, chaos erupted. People began to scream and run in all directions, their faces masks of fear and panic. Screams filled the air as people scrambled for cover, desperate to escape the unseen threat. The once orderly rally had descended into pandemonium, with people pushing and shoving in their haste to find safety. On the stage, Trump recoiled, his hand instinctively reaching for his ear. His expression was one of shock and confusion as he tried to process what had just happened. Secret Service agents, their training kicking in, immediately surrounded him, forming a protective barrier with their bodies. Their movements were swift and precise, a testament to their readiness for such emergencies. The rally, once a scene of political fervor, had transformed into a terrifying tableau of fear and uncertainty. The energy that had once fueled the crowd's enthusiasm had now turned into a frantic scramble for safety, leaving behind a haunting silence. The immediate aftermath of the shooting was a blur of activity. The air was thick with tension, and the sounds of chaos filled the venue. Secret Service agents, working with lightning speed, hustled Trump off the stage and into a waiting armored vehicle. Their training kicked in, and every movement was precise and calculated. Their priority was clear: get him to safety and medical attention as quickly as possible. The agents formed a protective barrier around him, their eyes scanning for any further threats. The crowd, meanwhile, remained in a state of panic and confusion. People were shouting, crying, and trying to make sense of what had just happened. Some fled the scene, desperate to escape the danger. They pushed and shoved, driven by a primal need to survive. Others huddled together, seeking solace in numbers. They clung to each other, hoping that the worst was over. As news of the shooting spread like wildfire, the nation watched in stunned silence. Television screens across the country flashed with breaking news alerts. Cable news channels cut to breaking news coverage, their anchors struggling to make sense of the unfolding events. The gravity of the situation was palpable. Social media erupted with a torrent of reactions: shock, disbelief, anger, and fear. Hashtags related to the incident began trending within minutes. At the hospital, doctors worked feverishly to assess Trump's condition. The emergency room was a flurry of activity as medical professionals sprang into action. The bullet, it turned out, had grazed his ear, causing significant bleeding but miraculously avoiding any major arteries or vital organs. The doctors breathed a sigh of relief. His injuries, while serious, were not life-threatening. He would survive. The relief was palpable, and the nation began to exhale, knowing that the worst had been averted. News of the attempted assassination sent shockwaves across the nation and around the world. Political differences were momentarily put aside as Americans from all walks of life united in their condemnation of the violence. World leaders expressed their shock and offered messages of support for Trump and the American people. The outpouring of support, however, was not universal. Some fringe elements on social media celebrated the attack, their hateful rhetoric a stark reminder of the deep divisions that plagued the country. Law enforcement agencies across the country were put on high alert, bracing for the possibility of copycat attacks or unrest. In the days following the shooting, vigils and prayer services were held across the country as Americans grappled with the enormity of what had transpired. The attack served as a stark reminder of the fragility of democracy and the ever-present threat of political violence. As the nation reeled from the shock of the assassination attempt, all eyes turned to the perpetrator, Thomas Matthew Crooks. The incident sent shockwaves through the country, leaving many to question how such a tragedy could occur. Who was this man, and what drove him to commit such a heinous act? The public was desperate for answers, and the media quickly began to dig into Crooks' past. The investigation into Crooks' background revealed a troubled individual with a history of mental health issues and extremist views. His life was marked by a series of personal failures and disappointments that seemed to fuel his growing resentment. A loner by nature, Crooks had become increasingly isolated in the years leading up to the attack, spending countless hours online consuming radical content and conspiracy theories. This digital echo chamber only served to reinforce his dangerous beliefs. His social media profiles painted a disturbing picture of a man consumed by anger, paranoia, and hatred towards Trump and his supporters. Posts filled with vitriol and threats were common, yet they went largely unnoticed by authorities. The investigation also uncovered a trail of red flags that, in retrospect, should have raised alarm bells. Friends and family had noticed his increasingly erratic behavior, but their concerns were either dismissed or ignored. Crooks had been on the radar of law enforcement for previous threats of violence, and his online activity suggested a growing fascination with weapons and mass shootings. Despite these warning signs, he managed to slip through the cracks of the system. The question of how he was able to acquire a firearm and carry out such a brazen attack despite these warning signs would become a central focus of the investigation. Authorities faced intense scrutiny as they worked to piece together the events leading up to the attack, hoping to prevent future tragedies. As the investigation continued, the nation grappled with the broader implications of Crooks's actions. Communities came together to mourn the victims and demand change, while policymakers debated the need for stricter gun control and better mental health support. The trial of Thomas Matthew Crooks would become a landmark case, highlighting the failures of the system and the urgent need for reform. The nation watched closely, hoping for justice and a path forward to prevent such senseless violence in the future.